The post-COVID economy has seen the attacks directed at those of migrant origin, the migrant community in South Africa. But this is not peculiar to South Africa only. We have seen it across the globe where migrant community is targeted. There's always been an argument that the post-COVID economy is going to be different from the how the economy was organized before. A number of companies has been reported in the mainstream media and elsewhere that the global economy has suffered under the pandemic. This has resulted in the working class in the main losing their jobs. And in many countries, the focus has been on the presence of migrants in those countries. What we are witnessing happening currently, different from what we saw in the struggle for national liberation, is the rise of what we call narrow nationalism. What is this narrow nationalism? Narrow nationalism, it looks into national interest. It does not care on what happens to other nations. It is not founded on solidarity. In the struggle against the colonialism and the struggle against the apartheid, the oppressed peoples of the world came together, united against oppression, and mobilized the progressive world in the struggle for national liberation and in the struggle against apartheid. But narrow nationalism does not seek to mobilize the progressive world around an agenda, but it seeks to protect its narrow national interests. This is what we are beginning to see. We saw what the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, when he elected into office, he then began or was campaigning to build a wall between Mexico and the United States so that the people of Mexico, the working class and the men, will not get into the United States. And Trump was campaigning on what we call narrow nationalism, what others are today in various parts of the world. You then have, which was basically put America first. We now have put South Africa first. We know what put South Africa first says and how it is articulated in its messaging in putting South Africa first. That the resources of South Africa or any other nation for that matter who have joined the narrow nationalism is that they must first and foremost benefit the locals, not anyone who is considered not to be a local. But this then goes down to, I saw some comrades and we are still yet to discuss comprehensively on what this means. There is also what is now called the put him Twagazi first. And also, all these are built around what is called the narrow nationalism, because the argument is that the resources of Umtwagazi must benefit Mtwagazi first. The resources, if you say put Namibia first, the resources of Namibia must benefit the people of Namibia. In Ghana, if put Ghana first and restrict foreigners in entering Ghana, or in Ivory Coast, this is what we are beginning to see, the rise of narrow nationalism, which is different from revolutionary nationalism, which all of us and the majority of us that participated in the struggle for national liberation, in the struggle against the apartheid, grew under a revolutionary nationalism, which in the main has a proletarian component or pan-African. And the Zimbabwe Communist Party is founded on this theory, pan-Africanism, scientific socialism, built on solidarity. But narrow nationalism, as we are beginning to see, is gaining root in a number of countries where there's competition for economy. And not surprisingly, of course, because the African people we have embraced the Western democracy, which, of course, as the Zimbabwe Communist Party or any communist party for that matter, practices democratic centralism, participation of citizens in the decision making. But in the main, what happens? Parties are now formed around an electoral agenda. So a party will then begin to say it looks into a future election and it says citizens are raising these issues. If we do not listen to the issues that citizens are raising, we are likely to lose a national vote or a vote in the next election. Therefore, the national bourgeoisie, which in this case will have destroyed the economy, will begin to say, will also find itself promoting narrow nationalism in the name of protecting the vote. Because what is key, it is no longer about building the economy of a country. It is now about ensuring that you do not lose the vote. In our revolutionary theory, we always talk of a developmental state. How do citizens participate in the building of a developmental state? Who owns the means of production? How do you build the economy? So, in the absence, because you have a political leadership, which Fratus Fanon, in his book or thesis, Wretched of the Earth, which he wrote in 1961, raises all these critical questions about that a national party or a part of national liberation. In most cases, these national parties, they do not pay attention to their economic policy. They leave that to future events. What drives them is the liberation, political power. The Zimbabwe Communist Party then says, completing the liberation of Zimbabwe at its first Congress in 2019, because it realizes that while we gained, even though others are arguing that we never gained majority rule because the majority of Zimbabweans are not in charge politically. But the reality is we defeated colonialism in Zimbabwe, and we always proclaim that 18th April is Independence Day. And we are saying our independence or our liberation cannot be complete without placing the economy, our economy, in the hands of a society as a whole. So we are, therefore, these attacks against foreigners, be it in South Africa, be it in any other country, must be understood in the context of the rise of narrow nationalism, which is taking root. Here in this video, I'm just introducing the subject, which we need to discuss in detail: narrow nationalism, and I will draw a lot from Fratis Fanon in chapter 3 of his book, Wretched of the Earth, where he speaks of the pitfalls of national consciousness. And I will define what is this pitfall, what does Fanon mean when he talks about pitfalls of national consciousness. But let me quote here as I conclude what Fanon says, which when I was reading, it was prophetic, because what Fanon wrote in 1961, even though Fanon was from Algeria, he was looking at Ivory Coast at the time, was looking into Senegal when he was writing, but some of the things are happening here in Southern Africa. Let me do a long quote here a bit. It says, I quote, "The working class of the towns, the masses of unemployed, the small artisans and the craftsmen, for their part, line up behind this nationalist attitude. But in all justice, let it be said, they only follow in the steps of their bourgeoisie. If the national bourgeoisie goes into competition with Europeans, the artisans and craftsmen start a fight against the non-national Africans. Close quote. Let me stop here and I'll continue. And this is exactly what we are currently experiencing. A fight against the non-national Africans that is happening in many countries in Africa. Let me continue with this quote so that I conclude as I introduce this discussion. I have lost a bit where I was reading. It says, if the national bourgeoisie goes into competition with the Europeans, the artisans and craftsmen start a fight against the non-national Africans. In the Ivory Coast, the anti-dogmen and the anti-voltaic troubles are in fact racial riots. The dogmen and voltaic peoples control the greater part of the petty trade, are, once independence is declared, the object of hostile manifestations on the part of the people of Ivory Coast. From nationalism, uh, uh, from nationalism, we've passed to ultra-nationalism, to chauvinism, and finally to racism. Here's the interesting part. These foreigners are called on to leave. Their shops are burned. Their street stalls are wrecked. And in fact, the government of Ivory Coast commands them to go, thus giving their nationals satisfaction, close quote. And it's a current campaign that is happening in a number of countries where the working class, because of this narrow nationalism, we will begin to see migrant workers as not part of them. And they begin to burn shops. We've seen campaigns, the right wings formations beginning this campaign, visiting shops owned by migrants. And all this we are witnessing in our lifetime, the rise of narrow nationalism. Now, the question which we must discuss as I conclude, what must be the attitude of revolutionaries? Should we fold our hands and let this narrow nationalism take root? Because it will then, if we are not serious, if we are not careful, let's assume for a moment that migrants get driven out. The fight will then turn ethnical. It will take an ethnic dimension. Others will say, no, the vendor should go back to Limpopo. The vendor cannot work in KZN. The Xhosa should go back to Eastern Cape. It will take an ethnic dimension. But to defeat this new nationalism, what we call narrow nationalism that is taken root, the only way to defeat it is to transform the economy. Unless we transform the economy and place it in the hands of majority as a whole, as long as the people feel disempowered economically, people feel excluded in participating in the economy of any country, they will begin to blame the presence of migrants. To say we have lost jobs is because of migrants. And the attacks will continue. When migrants are driven out, it will then take an ethnic dimension. And we know what this fight, the ethnic wars have done across Africa. Genocides have been committed across the continent using the ethnic card. So we cannot prevent the rise of narrow nationalism by speeches only. We must be practical. And this calls on the transformation of the economy so that the majority of the people are part of the economy. They participate in the economic development. And they can only do so when the economy is in the hands of society as a whole. As I have said, I'm introducing this subject as part of discussion because all of us were worried about the rise of narrow nationalism that is beginning to take root. As I have given examples, I know my Mtwagazi comrades will say, Comrade Mabene are betraying us, but that's a reality. When you say, and the reason of saying put Mtwagazi first is because there's a feeling, a genuine feeling for that matter, that Mtwagazians are excluded in the running of the economy in Zimbabwe. You submit your business proposal to be financed. That business proposal will be given to someone and it will be financed and will be excluded. When a public servant, what we call ethnic patronage, in terms of employing in the public service, people feel that they are marginalized, they are excluded. And we spoke previously about the attitude, what the people of Manicaland are feeling, that they are excluded in the economy of the country. And you'll begin to hear them saying, put Manicaland first. And where will this end? And revolutionaries must be worried. And the only way to deal with this new monster that is rising is to place the economy of society as a whole. To place the economy in the hands of society as a whole. And it is communist parties and socialist parties that have capacity to do so through national planning. And we are saying in the case of Zimbabwe, we can only build the Zimbabwean economy based on national planning. We need to build a national democratic economy based on national planning, national democratic, in the sense that the entire nation must participate in this economy. It must be national and democratic. Democratic in the sense that the drafting of the economic policy must not be done by the World Bank and the IMF. It must be done by the people of Zimbabwe from village level, ward, province to national. It becomes a national plan adopted by the people of Zimbabwe, linked to devolution of power. Because a national democratic economy must be based on national plan. It is a plan that is developed by the entirety of Zimbabweans and linked to devolution of power to the people. This is what must happen. And it is only communist parties that understand this concept. So unless the economy is transformed, we will soon be engulfed in civil wars because narrow nationalism will lead into the jihadist spreading into the SADC region. We have seen it in Mozambique. As we'll be discussing, as I've said, we're introducing this topic, we know where the jihadists has been operating in Mozambique and the problems. Because the people in that area, they feel they are disempowered, they are excluded from the economy. And the jihadists take advantage of that. And if we are not careful, the whole of the SADC region will be engulfed into war. I am Mabuto Nicholas Mabena, General Secretary of the Zimbabwe Communist Party. Please like this video, subscribe, write your comments. We will probably over the weekend as part of our political school discuss further this. And Comrade Expressive Music says, this is learning talk, it will not work. Socialism destroyed Africa. socialism, the reason Zimbabwe is messed up. Well, your facts are very wrong because for starters, Zimbabwe was never socialist. What happened is that the Rhodesians, which we discussed in another video, the Rhodesians in 19 when Ian Douglas Smith unilaterally declared independence on the 11th of November 1965. Because you know that Ian Smith participated in the Second World War, and they studied, the Rhodesians studied how Britain organized its economy during the Second World War for the purposes of winning in the war. It placed the companies; they became state-owned companies. The economy was under the state control in Britain during the Second World War. This is why when the Rhodesians unilaterally declared independence, they then adopted national planning. If you do your research and check the establishment of the parastatals in Zimbabwe, which ZANU-PF has basically destroyed, be it Coal Storage Commission, be it Dairy Board, be it ZESA, National Railways, and so forth, it has its roots in the Rhodesians because they were copying how Britain organized its economy during the Second World War. Their economy was based on national planning, but we have always criticized them that the Rhodesian economy, while what was sound, it was built along racial lines. It excluded the majority of black people. But of course, comrade, we will continue to have this discussion. When ZANU-PF came into power in 1980, I'm now concluding. When ZANU-PF came into power in 1980, it did not introduce socialism. It simply continued with the national planning until 1990. When in 1991, when we then introduced on the advice of the IMF and the World Bank Economic Structural Adjustment Program by an economist who was Minister of Finance, Bernard Chidzero. And we are saying Professor Mthuli Ncube, the Zimbabwe Minister of Finance, is the second Bernard Chidzero because his policies and Professor Mthuli Ncube are not different from the policies of Bernard Chidzero. And today, we're a country that does not have its own currency. So, comrades, let's continue having this discussion. It is an interesting discussion. Otherwise, comrades, thank you so much. Goodbye.